I did lie to you. I shouldn't have. All I can say is that if you get this, stay away.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Review Fluxx. Today we're going to be talking about Capcom's newest entry, Resident Evil 7. And it had a lot to prove after the disaster that was Resident Evil 6. And like the fourth entry, they needed something to revitalize their flagship series in an innovative way. Capcom decided the way to go was to move away from a third-person action shooter back to a moody environmental experience with a new first-person perspective.
Did anyone see you? Did he see you?
Hey, who else is here? What the hell's going on?
Daddy's coming. We need to go.
This move isn't innovative like previous entries were, but rather follows the growing trends of today's horror genre. Resident Evil 7 retains many of its series' classic hallmarks, including creepy environments, outlandish characters, and a dash of cheese to round it all out. Even though it's a first-person shooter, I was pleasantly surprised to find that it does feel like a Resi game. You have an outrageous plot, mutated monsters in a creepy mansion, enemies crashing through walls Nemesis style, and an unmotivated plethora of notes and herbs. Sweet, sweet medical herbs. While they've captured the tone pretty well, my biggest problem would have to be that this game feels a bit too focused to cash in on the emerging VR trend. It starts out very linear in design, with jump scares and spooky noises making the experience feel more like a local fair's haunted house. You can see the scares coming from a mile away, and they usually happen after obtaining key items and right outside of the destination. Ah, fucking bubbles! The game starts with you, Ethan Winters, going out to a random location in the Louisiana bayou after receiving a message from your wife who went missing 3 years prior. Not much is known except for the fact that she was working on a babysitting mission where her ship went missing, and her new video tells you to stay away. Somehow you end up at the exact house she's been staying at, an old derelict mansion where an insane family lives, and there's really no reason for you to know she was there. Mia, seemingly possessed, stabs and then cuts your hand off. After you're dragged back to the Baker's family dinner party, and somehow your hand is magically reattached. I'm not kidding, they just staple your hand back on or whatever. Your mission begins to save your wife and get the hell out of there. The story is propelled forward through a series of phone calls by Zoe, daughter to the insane Baker family, trying to save you from her turned family.
There's something I need you to do, but I can't explain it right now. You may need some sort of keys to do it, but find a way out of the house.
You'll feel somewhat sympathetic for the group of antagonists considering they were once a normal family. You're quickly introduced to all of them, including the controlling father Jack, the bipolar mother Marguerite, the aggressive son Lucas, and a creepy elderly lady who just follows you around. All around the mansion, like a comatose version of Mr. X. Besides Lucas, who does make for an intimidating and fun character, the rest are kind of bland and ultimately forgettable in an equally unimpressive storyline. In fact, the plot borrows heavily from the Silent Hill series in not just tone but also its psychological approach. If stealing PT's gameplay wasn't enough, the game pretty much rips off Silent Hill 2's premise and style.
Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
Unlike those two entries, however, Resident Evil 7 does nothing to set itself apart and feels like a spin-off game that was granted an entry into the main series. The hackneyed and nonsensical story, which was conceived by the writer of Spec Ops: The Line and the first Westerner to touch the franchise, adds nothing to the overall lore of a series flush with opportunity. Possibly the best and most underutilized aspect of the narrative is a segment where Lucas sends you through a series of torturous entertainment that should have hung around longer than it did. The third act may be one of the worst I've ever seen in a narrative. When you're switched over to a character with very little backstory, it lasts for far too long, introduces the real antagonist far too late, and concludes with a disappointing boss battle similar in meaning and useless cameos as Operation Raccoon City. Gameplay is definitely the saving grace for this impressive entry, and I was honestly surprised at how well the game translates to a first-person shooter. Your character moves with a nice flow, and creeping around feels almost second nature. The series has returned to conserving ammo, dodging incoming attacks, and knowing when to fight or flee. Anyone who's ever played a first-person shooter will easily pick up the aim and shoot gameplay with the added bonus of a block button. Blocking makes sense considering most enemies are melee based, but it does make the combat feel a little too easy. You also don't aim down sights, the developers opting for a never preferred slight zoom and focused reticle that feels very dated. The inventory system is very convenient, with weapons being assigned to the D-pad and a HUD menu allowing for quick access to your inventory and easy combining of various elements in order to make bullets and first aid on the fly. Like in The Last of Us, gathering resources in order to make supplies is essential to surviving, and choosing what supplies to take or leave is a crucial aspect. Upgrades can also be purchased by finding little tokens around the mansion, adding a bit of a scavenger hunt element to the gameplay. You can also discover supplies in wooden crates, but unlike Resident Evil 4's snakes, there's no way to tell if it'll explode when you knife them. This is bullshit, especially in a game geared at conserving ammo. Healing also feels hit or miss, with first aid packs giving out seemingly random degrees of health, and the bloody overlay explaining how much damage you're taking as opposed to how much more you can take. Locations consist of hallways and rooms with a few open spaces sprinkled in. This keeps the combat terrifying, but can sometimes feel like a Benny Hill sketch when you run around room's centerpiece in order to keep away from your enemy. The only thing that breaks up the monotony of running and shooting is one puzzle that the game utilizes 3 times, where you rotate a statue until its shadow reveals a figure. While the shooting is fun enough to keep you engaged, having some additional puzzles would have added some diversity to an otherwise one-note symphony. The game also features VHS tapes you can collect and play, flashing back to previous characters before the current narrative. There's 4 unique cassettes, but these segments aren't necessary and come across as very rigid and linear. The segments walk you by the hand to your destination with no deviations and only the possibility of zigging when you should have zagged. With these included interludes, the game should last you about 8 hours, but once you play it, you should be able to storm through it in a few. On a technical level, the game is very impressive in some aspects and abysmal in others. The game starts with a close-up, highlighting how off these facial animations are. There's no lip syncing and the character movements look overwhelmingly stiff compared to previous entries in the series. Models also don't look directly at you when speaking, rather in the general direction the developers assumed you would be standing. The environments and model design, however, are spectacular, utilizing some exceptional lighting and shading effects and featuring enough detail to sell every location. Resident Evil 7 is an enjoyable enough experience that could have been called The Bayou, considering it has very little to do with the series' timeline. Its VR-friendly gameplay makes an enjoyable and fast-paced experience, but lacks the charm and memorability of previous entries in the series. This outing feels a little too premature to really feel like a full entry, and in many ways feels like a carbon copy of Konami's neighboring series. While it wasn't my favorite entry, it's definitely an indication of a brighter future for Capcom, and hopefully that Resident Evil 2 remake will use this exciting new game engine. Hey, I'm Trevor Anderson, and if you enjoyed this review, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're someone who wants to contribute to this show, make sure you send us an email at ChannelFluxx@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you next time.
Ethan!
No more bullshit, Mia. I want some answers.
I know, you're right, and I always wanted to tell you, but I can only remember a little, and the rest is just gone.
Daddy, right? You mind if I borrow Mommy for a little bit? Why don't you stand there? Do something!
Ethan!